Good morning, gang. Happy Sunday. This is, I don't know, might be kind of boring, might not be boring, depending on whether you're interested in this stuff. I'm going to talk about mate selection, sexual selection, um, hormones, um, the things that influence hormones. What's up, man? Um, I, I haven't really prepared a presentation for this, so I've pulled up a number of studies that are focused on this. Pretty much anytime I share something about um, sex or mate selection or things like that, I get a lot of questions. And I've talked about this before. I think I did a live stream on the way to school talking about it, and I was mostly drawing from memory. So I pulled up a number of studies, and these are from clinical journals and things. I don't know that you'll have access to them unless they're available for free. I have access through university. What's up, Drew? Speak of the devil. Um, so, briefly, men uh, men are looking for signs of fertility, and again, there are all kinds of exceptions to this. I'm speaking in generalities. Um, Men are looking for signs of fertility. They want a maximally fertile female, so youth, vivaciousness, hip to waist ratio, all these things. So in the sexual marketplace, um, a woman's value is determined by her fertility, and a man's value is determined by his resources. So eggs in one hand, dollars in the other hand, if you want to put it in a modern context. Now, there are a number of uh, influencers acting on this mate selection process. And so you can see both an evolution within certain populations and a devolution in certain populations with regard to what we're looking for in a prospective mate. And these things are going to differ based on what we hope to get out of a relationship. So if you're looking at women's mate selection within short-term relationship selection versus long-term relationship selection, you'll see differences even in like what they're looking for, what the smell does to the brain, and this works for both men and women. The reproductive strategies are a little bit different. Women are typically engaged in hypergamy, so they're looking for someone who is better situated than they are with regard to what they're looking for. So someone who is wealthier than they are, someone who can provide resources. And men typically are looking across and down hierarchies, hypogamy, looking for women who are attractive, as attractive as they can afford, so to speak, given their access to resources. So um, simply put, there's a reason billionaires, no matter how they look, are going to have hot girlfriends. They're going to have hot wives, because it's not their physical attractiveness that is considered as a primary variable in female mate selection in a long-term relationship situation. Now, maybe in a short-term relationship, a woman might go for that fucking magician guy in Las Vegas, Chris Angel, the guy who's playing the bad boy, he's playing the alpha. They might go for a guy like that short term, and so this is another thing that's acting on our courtship rituals is the cultural influence. So training women to look for short-term instant gratification partners as opposed to a long-term partner, and there are going to be variations in the ovulatory cycle that dictate the type of guy that a girl is looking for. The bad boy during ovulation, they're going to be looking for the best genes they can get. So they're looking for, well, I'll get into a number of those traits. They're looking for a guy with the markers of good genetics, the alpha Chad. Men are also sensitive to that ovulatory cycle in women, and they rate women as more attractive based on photos or body scent or whatever in experimentation that Men are keyed into the ovulatory cycle, and a woman is going to be more attractive the more fertile she is, and that ebbs and flows along with menstruation, ovulation. So let's get into these studies. I'm going to try not to talk too much in these so that it doesn't become confusing what my thoughts are on these studies and what the studies themselves are saying. Let's get into it. First one, this is from Maynor and McNulty from Florida State University in Tallahassee. This is called Attunement to the Fertility Status of Same-Sex Rivals, Women's Testosterone Responses to Olfactory Ovulation Cues. So I'll read the abstract here, and then I might dig a little deeper into it, or I'll try and summarize it, because I know not everyone reads this kind of stuff, and it's reading science language sometimes is difficult to interpret. Like if you don't have a background in finance and you're reading, you get it. I don't need to explain that. Evolutionary theories of mating suggest that changes in fertility across a menstrual cycle play an important role in sexual selection. In line with this framework, the current research examined whether olfactory cues to the fertility of a same-sex rival would prompt hormonal signs of intrasexual competition in women. Intrasexual, within the sex, so women competing with other women for access to the highest quality males. Women exposed to the scent of another woman close to ovulation subsequently displayed higher levels of testosterone than women exposed to the scent of women far from ovulation. Okay, so if a woman is around another woman who's hot and she's ovulating, that woman is going to produce more testosterone. She's going to be driven to increase her competitive drive is going to increase, and you'll actually see a measurable increase in testosterone production. So you get an endocrine response in response to a woman's proximity to a fertile and attractive woman. What do you think that testosterone does? Well, we'll get into it. Whereas women exposed to the scent of a woman in the mid-luteal phase displayed sizable decreases in testosterone over time. No such decline was observed among women exposed to the scent of a woman near ovulation. Thus, olfactory cues signaling a rival's heightened level of fertility were associated with endocrinological responses in women that could be linked to intrasexual competition. So, to put it in bro terms, women are more competitive toward women that are hotter than them, who are younger than them, and who are more fertile than them. And it's not just, oh, that lady's a bitch based on my previous experience with hot girls, or that girl's not going to treat you right, yada, yada, yada. This, what we'll call jealousy, let's say. Women are going to be more aggressive toward women they perceive as a threat, even if they're not even if they're not engaged in competition over males, because it's biological. You have this olfactory sense in your nose that allows you to take in chemicals and assess mates and assess your environment, all of those things. There is a biological drive that is making you increase your level of testosterone and be more competitive with other women for mates, even if you're not looking for a mate. And this ovulatory cycle sort of dictates your level of reproductive fitness in the eyes, nose, perceptions of other women and other men. Let's see here. In humans and many other species, individuals frequently compete with members of their own sex in order to gain reproductive access to opposite-sex partners. Although Darwin originally thought of intrasexual competition as a primarily male phenomenon, recent evolutionary perspectives suggest that intrasexual competition among females is common as well. In species in which both sexes invest in parental care, such as humans, both sexes discriminate in their choice of mates and compete over access to high-quality mates. So that's an interesting thing. Both sexes invest in parental care. That's not common in the animal kingdom. There are a few species of mammals that will both invest in parental care, but it's especially rare. Humans are one of those things, and even within the subset human, Homo sapiens, You can see differences in reproductive strategies within ethnic groups, within socioeconomic groups, within men versus women. And this, you can look into, Stefan Molyneux's got a video or maybe a series of videos on R versus K selection. So the R reproductive strategy, you can think of rabbits. Rabbits are just banging it out, getting as many offspring out there as they can, and the males are going to have no parental involvement in the lives of their offspring. They just want to spray and pray, right? The spray and pray reproductive strategy is R, little r. The K reproductive strategy, a good example of this would be coyotes or wolves. There's an episode of Joe Rogan podcast where he's interviewing I think he's an anthropologist, but he is also involved in studying coyote patterns, whatever. But so coyotes, female coyotes, can inhibit their cell division, sort of. That might be, okay, it's unnecessary to go that deep. They can control the number of offspring that they have, and they can do a roll call, so to speak, when they're doing their coyote call thing. That's a roll call to find out how many of them are around, right? And oh, we're missing members. Maybe they've been killed, they've moved on, something like that. I need to increase the number of offspring that I'm having. So I go into ovulation sooner, make myself available to males more readily, and increase the number of offspring that I'm having. And within these packs, within mammals that you have parental involvement in child rearing or offspring rearing, the more involvement you have, the closer you're getting to a K selection. K selection, they are having children or offspring based on the amount of resources that are available. That it's almost a conscious decision about, okay, I have this much food available, there are this many people in the wolf pack, I should have this many children. The rabbit's not thinking about that. The rabbit's thinking, fuck, look at all these resources, it's abundant, let's bang, 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 bang. R versus K, little r, big K. YouTube it, it's your friend. Where was I? The degree to which people perceive a same-sex individual as a threatening rival depends on whether that individual displays characteristics valued by the opposite sex. For example, men are attracted to cues of youth, fertility, and sexual accessibility in women. And consequently, women are particularly vigilant of other women who display cues of youth, fertility, and sexual accessibility. So how are you receiving those signals? Well, pupil dilation, full rosy lips, reddened cheeks, flushed skin, enlarged breasts, a high hip to waist, or I'm sorry, a low hip to waist ratio. So the smaller the waist, the wider the hips. Those are signs of youth and fertility. So there are ways that this can be tricked, right? I can get breast implants. I can put on lipstick. I can put on face shit. I can make my skin appear more healthy. I can dye my hair to make it appear as though I'm younger. So there are a number of ways to fool that. And in the same way, when women are looking for signs of reproductive fitness in men, they're looking at facial symmetry, they're looking at how deep is the voice, masculine body language, muscle density, bone density, testosterone. They're especially sensitive to the smell of testosterone, and their interest in high testosterone males will increase as ovulation occurs. Further, women frequently derogate and indirectly aggress against attractive women who display an interest in short-term sexual encounters. So, okay, that girl's a slut. We don't want her hanging out with us. She's a slut. She gives it up too easy. She's giving away for free what we are trying to make men earn. So women who have a long-term mate selection strategy, they're looking for not just the guy who's willing to fuck them, but the guy who is going to be a partner, like what you're looking for in a partner, in a husband, in a boyfriend, etc., for the long term. Women who are engaged in that type of reproductive strategy are going to have some hostility toward girls who are just giving it up, who are out in bars with, made up to look like they are reproductively fit, made up to look like they're fertile. And again, recognize those tricks, right? All that makeup, the tits pushed up, clothes that accentuate those signs of fertility are designed to grab you by the nutsack. And that short-term reproductive strategy is going to make the women who have the long-term reproductive strategy not feel so good about it. And there's going to be some hostility there. Behaviors such as derogation and aggression reflect strategies used to reduce the mate value of same-sex rivals. Okay, she's a slut. She probably has diseases. She's got kids from different dads. All this, the cattiness, right? Men do it too. It's just a different type of aggression, because men, if I'm engaged in competition with a man, or some aggression with a man, I know that can lead to physical violence, and it's likely to. Physical violence is on the table as an option. Okay, we can't mediate this dispute. Escalate, escalate, escalate. We're actually fighting now. Women, on the other hand, typically physical violence between women is not on the table. So it becomes verbal, it becomes derogatory, it becomes a matter of using verbal aggression or psychological means to reduce the value of a prospective rival or a perceived rival. Thus, women displaying desirable characteristics, including youth, fertility, and sexual accessibility, serve as potent rivals for other women, and consequently they elicit responses associated with intrasexual competition. Combining these findings with research on menstrual cycle effects helps generate novel predictions about how women will react to other women who are highly fertile. Around the time of ovulation, when fertility levels peak, women display increased interest in short-term mating with high-quality mates. High-quality mates in this context, in the short-term reproductive strategy context, are those with good genes. So they're looking for the athlete, the jock, the Chad. That guy is likely to get you pregnant. He is likely to have good genes with regard to physical attributes of reproductive fitness. That guy might be a fucking idiot. He might be homeless. He might be jobless. A number of things. But that isn't really so relevant in the short-term reproductive strategy. In the girl that's going home with guys from the bar, she's not thinking long-term. She's thinking, I want to get laid. I have high testosterone right now. I'm ovulating right now. I'm driven to pick a guy with facial symmetry, broad shoulders, deep voice, athletic, masculine guy. Alpha seed, beta need. So you're looking for the seed from the alpha, but you need a beta, which is actually a gamma, to provide for the child, to provide for you. You want a guy who's going to stick around, and that who the preference is fluctuates based on ovulation, menstruation. Thus, around the time of ovulation, women display the characteristics, sexual accessibility and desirability, that other women find most threatening in an intersexual rival. Consequently, women may respond to highly fertile women in a competitive fashion. Indeed, females of many mammalian species are particularly vigilant of other females high in fertility. In yellow baboons, for example, females tend to monopolize the attention of males when other females are likely to conceive. Okay, that baboon is fertile right now, and all of the males in the troop here know that she's fertile. So I'm going to pick out the alpha, and I'm going to distract him from that female so that he doesn't impregnate that female. And then when I become fertile, I have access to this male. So it's the baboon cock block. For many sexually reproducing species, female fertility is detected via olfactory processes. I explained that already. Olfactory is the bulb at the roof of your nasal cavity that interprets signals that come in. It has chemical receptor sites, sends a signal to your brain. Your brain recognizes that as the smell of citrus or the smell of booty sweat. Males are sensitive to chemosensory signals released by females during estrus. Similar findings have been observed in humans, as men are attracted to the scent of women close to ovulation. Sensitivity to olfactory fertility cues is not restricted to males. Females of a variety of species are sensitive to chemosensory signals left by same-sex rivals in fertility. For example, these are, what do they call it? Cotton-top tamarins. Females will mark up trees or branches or things like that with their scent when they are in estrus, when they're ready to become pregnant. And other females who are not fertile at that time will also mark the same spot to degrade the chemical signal that's present on branches, leaves, etc. So even among these primates, in the same behavior you see in women, but not in the bar, not at the yoga studio or the gym or whatever, you see it occurring in the forest where these primates live. Let's see here. Briefly on testosterone. Testosterone is a key hormone involved in intersexual competition, so it's no wonder that men are competitive. According to the challenge hypothesis, during periods of social instability or when reproductive challenges arise, testosterone levels rise to facilitate intrasexual competition, e.g. fights, territory, dominance, resources, or access to potential reproductive opportunity. This hypothesis has been applied primarily to males because they are typically less choosy of the two sexes and thus are more likely to compete over potential mates. So, which do you think is more likely? An attractive guy with a big fat girl, or an attractive girl with a big fat guy? Without any other variables inserted. I'm not talking about a big fat guy who is a billionaire, just a big fat gross guy and a big fat gross girl. In my opinion, and based on my observation and experience, typically you're going to see fit guys with big disgusting girls. And it's unlikely, unless the guy is rich, that you're going to see a fit girl with a big fat disgusting guy. Yes, I am fat shaming. All right, so this study, testosterone is going to determine your level of competition, and that's inter-sex competition and intra-sex competition. Next, olfactory function relates to sexual experience in adults. This one's kind of about how satisfying sex is based on scent, right? So this is something I mentioned yesterday, I think, with feedback that someone sent me. Cologne, perfume, both the same thing. It's just like makeup. It's designed to mask your inadequacy, has sort of a negative connotation to it. Makeup, clothing, guys peacocking, things like that, those are to enhance your signals of reproductive fitness. Cologne, perfume, sort of act to mask it, but it might be something that you have a more positive perception of someone who has a good smell or good odor, not a smell, than someone who has a bad smell. So if you smell bad, or if you are low in testosterone, if you have some genetic deficiency, wearing cologne might be a good idea for you if you're hoping to trick some woman into liking you, because women are especially sensitive to genetic inadequacy. They are especially sensitive to low testosterone, and they can smell it. So you can act like a tough guy. You can act like an alpha. You can act reproductively fit. You can't really change your bone structure and things like that, but you can change your muscularity, you can wear clothes that indicate that you have access to resources, you can drive a flashy car, all of that stuff. But she can still smell that you're a loser, and she can smell that you are incompatible with her genes with regard to the production of offspring. So this is from Bendas, Hummel, and Croy, published in, let's see here, Springer Science, Springer Nature 2018. The olfactory system contributes significantly to human social behavior, and especially to mate choice and empathic functioning. In this context, previous research examining individuals with impaired olfactory function indicated an influence of the sense of smell on different aspects of sexuality. The applied samples, methods, and results are diverse, and involvement in confounding factors such as breathing problems, depression, social insecurity can't be ruled out. The present study examined the potential correlation between odor threshold in healthy participants and their sexual desire, sexual experience, and sexual performance. Odor threshold was assessed, yada, 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 battery of questions on sexual desire, sexual frequency, sexual experience, as well as sexual performance. Odor sensitivity correlated positively with sexual experience. Participants with high olfactory sensitivity reported higher pleasantness of sexual activities. Further, women with high olfactory sensitivity reported a higher frequency of orgasms during sexual intercourse. These findings were exclusively present for sexual experience. No significant correlations were detected for sexual desire or sexual performance. The experience of sexual interactions appears to be enriched by olfactory input. We discussed the perception of certain body odors may contribute. We discussed that the perception of certain body odors may contribute to the concept of sexual pleasure by enhanced recruitment of reward areas. Okay, so during sex, there are levels of engagement. You have 5 senses, right? So the more of those senses you can engage in the experience, the more of those sense stimulating broadcasts from your partner that you can engage in, the more satisfying sex is going to be. So if I'm wearing a latex bodysuit like a weirdo, I'm not getting the tactile perception. If I'm wearing a latex weirdo bodysuit and I'm also covered in grape flavor enhancer, I'm losing the taste. If that grape flavor enhancer is also scented like grape candy, I'm losing the olfactory sense. So more satisfying sex is going to be the result of raw human, if that makes sense. If you're not inhibiting those sensory broadcasts from your partner and from yourself with cologne, perfume, makeup, clothing, all that stuff, sex is going to be more satisfying. It's positively correlated with frequency of orgasm, all of that stuff, and satisfaction with intercourse. Let's see here. Olfaction moderates social communication, is important for reproductive behavior. Olfactory-mediated inbreeding avoidance, mate selection, and the ability of detecting emotions are assumed to contribute to human sexual behavior. Furthermore, olfactory cues, such as androgen-like odors, evoke sexual arousal. Correspondingly, the olfactory perception of compounds in sexual hormones leads to a hypothalamic activation in male and female individuals. Hence, it can be assumed that olfaction contributes to sexual arousal and behavior. An impairment of olfactory function should thus affect one's sex life. So if you can't smell, you're going to have worse sex. If your partner can't smell you, the sex is not going to be as satisfying. Indeed, patients with dysomia suffer from reduced quality of life that affects different areas of daily life, such as social interactions and sexual encounters. In a broad internet-based study on characteristics of chemosensory disorders, more than 50% of participants with self-reported chemosensory disorders reported a negative impact on their sexual behavior. So it's inhibiting sex drive, and it's inhibiting your satisfaction with sex when you end up engaged in intercourse. Doop boop doop boop doo. The relationship between oral contraceptive use and sensitivity to olfactory stimuli by Renfro and Hoffman. This is from Knox College Psychology Department. Well, I'll read it and see if it just cues me to talk about these things. This study examined differences in olfactory sensitivity between naturally cycling women and women taking oral contraceptives to odors. These odors included a variety of scents, citrus, what else do they use here? Lemon, peppermint, rose, yeah, just different scents, easily recognized scents, and androsterone, and musk. And so there are other studies that sort of look at the same thing, where they're having men wear a clean, unscented t-shirt while they sleep, and then they take that t-shirt off, put it into a jar, it gets sealed up. Men aren't wearing any cologne, they shower using unscented soap, and so you're getting as close to the scent of the guy as possible. Women rate men's attractiveness based on the scent of these t-shirts and also on photographs of the men. So you're getting visual stimulus, like I talked about, the facial symmetry, what is attractive when I'm looking at a person with nothing else attached to it, and then you're also getting the chemical signal, the olfactory sense, from the t-shirt. And these are separated and then quantified to look at whether there's correlation between physical attractiveness and the scent of physical attractiveness. Naturally cycling women in the periovulatory phase were significantly more sensitive to androsterone, and musk than the women taking oral contraceptives. These findings give support to odor-specific hormonal modulation of olfaction, further due to the social and possibly sexual nature of these odors. Future work should address whether there is a relationship between decreased sensitivity to these odors and reported behavioral side effects among women taking oral contraceptives. So, women who are taking oral contraceptives have an inhibited olfactory sense. They are less able to smell whether or not you're attractive. So I've cut off my hands, right? I've lost tactile sense. In this case, I've lost olfactory sense. I've limited the number of inputs into the calculus that allows me to decide whether you are a suitable mate, whether you're attractive. So if I've lost that scent, and all I'm on now is how deep is the guy's voice? Does he move right? Is he visually attractive? Okay, I've lost the thing that allows me to know whether my genes are compatible with his. I've lost the thing that allows me to gauge his how competitive he will be for resources, which is going to be correlated with testosterone production. How competitive will this male be? And so taking hormonal birth control is preventing women from being able to smell whether or not you are a loser. Women who are not on birth control are going to be able to smell whether you're a loser or not. And that's a simplified way to say it, but it's anecdotal. It's only my experience, but I talk to people about this stuff all the time. People who get divorced. I've talked to people who were divorced. I've talked to people who were married, people who have stayed married, people who broke up certain times, things like that. Reliably, people who get divorced after they start trying to have children. When they were dating, when they were engaged, and when they were married, the woman was on birth control. And so, based on what I just explained, she's unable to tell whether you are attractive across all of these dimensions of attractiveness. One of them is especially important. One of the oldest senses that we have is that olfactory sense. So that biological drive, that component of attraction is very, very important. If you were going to weight them, that olfactory sense is heavy. So you've been masking that olfactory sense. You met this guy at Panera Bread, and you're on birth control, and he, he has it all, right? You guys are dating, it's going great, personality's great, all that stuff. Okay, now you go and get married, and now you're going to try and have children, and she comes off of birth control, and now she doesn't even want to be around you, because there is a signal she's receiving now that she wasn't receiving before that indicates that you have some genetic defect that, if her genes combine with yours, is likely to produce offspring that have a severe genetic defect, or that your genes are incompatible in some way. This billions of years old evolutionary thing is telling her this isn't the right guy, and so now you're fucked, right? So unless she goes back on birth control and just stays on birth control, and she's able to ignore that you are incompatible with her DNA, you're in a bad spot. And so I've talked to a bunch of people where this has happened, and it's sad because we don't talk to people about this. You get sex education, and sex education is telling you how to play with yourself, and how to get your parents to let you cut your dick off, and how to talk about homosexuality as if it's virtuous, and trans kids, and gonorrhea, and people with AIDS aren't that bad. I can remember in middle school, they had a guy with AIDS come into the classroom to talk to us about AIDS and talk to us about his life and stuff like that. And I can remember even at that time, like, this is fucking ridiculous. Why? I don't think anyone at that time didn't know that you couldn't just catch AIDS from shaking someone's hand and things like that. But that's the kind of stuff that they were talking about. They wanted to get kids more comfortable with being around men with AIDS or people with AIDS, so that there's not a stigma attached to people that got AIDS. How did you get AIDS? Well, I was engaged in homosexual intercourse without protection, and shooting intravenous drugs, and going to fucking raves. Okay, so maybe we could talk about how to avoid those, as opposed to why it's okay to give a person with AIDS a hug. I don't even know what sent me off on that. There are a number of physiological, perceptual, and behavioral changes that have been reported to co-occur with ovulation in women. These changes have largely been attributed to the hormonal fluctuations that characterize ovulation, i.e. pre-ovulatory spikes in luteinizing hormone and estradiol. Because women taking oral contraceptives do not experience hormonal fluctuations as naturally cycling women do, and they do not ovulate, they provide a particularly good opportunity to assess which of these mid-cycle changes are specifically related to hormonal influences. Approximately 82% of women between the ages of 15 and 44 in the United States have at one point in time regularly used an oral contraceptive pill as a form of birth control. The combination pill containing an estrogen and progestin is reportedly the most common form of the pill in use. The combination pill targets the hypothalamus and pituitary, altering hormone levels to prevent ovulation. The estrogen component suppresses the follicle-stimulating hormone, preventing the development of the follicle, and the progestin component suppresses the luteinizing hormone surge necessary for ovulation. What can you do about this? No one wants to hear this, I guess, but abstain, right? If you're dating, if you're serious about finding a partner that you want to marry, that you want to have a family with, that you want to share some long-term goal with, it's better that you're not taking something that is inhibiting your hormone production. It's better that you're not taking something that is inhibiting your senses. It's better that you're not taking something that blinds you to inadequacies and deficiencies in a prospective partner. So if you're just engaged in a short-term mating strategy where you just want sex, and you're driven to do this by your biology, there are chemicals that your body produces that are driving you, and you're letting your dick or your vagina steer you, maybe that's not the way to go. But if you are doing that and you're comfortable risking all of the things associated with that, sure, stay on birth control, but be mindful of the fact that a the what might be the most important aspect of mate selection, which is that sense of smell, is turned off right now. And when I turn this on, there's a chance that this is not a suitable partner. My body is going to tell me this is not a suitable partner. Really the only way to overcome that would be to date seriously, date for a long-term mating strategy, and abstain from sex without taking hormonal birth control. Fuck, well, how did this get to 173% limit? Okay, I'll tell you what study this is from in a second. I'll have to scroll back up. But prior research suggests that body odor may only contribute to the attractiveness judgments of women to the extent that they exhibit high levels of fertility. This may be because infertile women, those using hormonal birth control, are less sensitive to olfactory cues specifically related to sexual mate preference. Example given is dissimilar major histocompatibility complex. That's from Wedekind and Fury, 1997. That's the study I was talking about. So your olfactory sense is inhibited by birth control. And so, let's see here. What's the male version of blocking their olfactory? What can prevent a man from sensing compatibility besides makeup and cosmetic surgery? Well, nothing really. Lies, I suppose, because if we narrow it down to what the exchange is in the sexual marketplace, it's a good question, Mark. If we narrow it down to just those two things, eggs and resources, eggs and dollars, let's say, you are looking for signs of fertility. You are looking basically at visual signals of genes. Secondary to that, you're looking at promiscuity, modesty. Is this person smart? Is she empathetic? Is she caring? Is she kind? Those are secondary characteristics. So primarily, it's the fertility thing. And so based upon that primary component of mate selection, it's just those things. I can make myself look younger. I can make myself look hotter. I can make myself look more fertile. The personality aspect, unless she's a good actor or you're an idiot and you allow those visual signals to override the rational aspect of your mind, there's not a way to trick that. If you're asking serious questions, okay, what are your plans for your life? What are your parents like? Are your parents together? Can I meet them? If you're dating as if you are looking for a partner as opposed to a piece of ass, those false signals of reproductive fitness aren't going to grab you the way they would a guy who is just trying to get laid. So maybe that means taking control of that bull that's driving you to just reproduce. Okay, so exercising left brain function and the mediating force between the right and left brain, using your head instead of your balls to drive your decision making. Aside from those things that you mentioned, there's not a lot to do. A woman can dress more provocatively. She may flirt with other men, other high status men, to make you jealous. There are a number of things, but boiling it down to just those two aspects so that we know what the exchange is that's taking place. It's binary, so it's limited, but it gives you an idea of what your dick is looking for, what your genes are looking for, and you need to keep in mind what your brain is looking for. What is your goal here? Is it a long-term strategy or a short-term strategy? How can I mitigate the risks associated with both of those? So when you're dating, date seriously instead of, what do you think about the fucking weather or local sport team? That type of shit. Surface level conversation. And in my experience, men and women alike, they may be apprehensive at first to real conversation like that, but most often it's the preference. People don't like to talk about just surface shit that's meaningless. It's a good question, man. Hopefully I answered it. I don't know if I did or not. It was necessary to test my general hypothesis using samples of women who reported being fertile or infertile. I predicted that attractiveness would be better predicted by visual than olfactory cues for both fertile and infertile women. However, it was possible that olfaction would play a larger role in the attractiveness judgments of fertile women. My opinion, he says it's possible, my opinion is that it's going to play a huge role. Olfactory sense is going to play a huge role because this is one of the first senses that developed, right? It's not as evolved, you could say, as your visual cortex and the visual system that gives you light input, but it's old. It's really, really old. The same thing, Jordan Peterson talks about the lobsters, and people bring that up all the time to make a joke out of it. The aspect of your being that tells you where you are with respect to competitors, with respect to other men, with respect to women, with respect to the world. It's a status recognition system. That status recognition system and the same chemical pathway that takes place in your brain is present in lobsters. And so lobsters and humans diverged 600 million years ago. That's a made-up number, but it's a long, long time ago. So before there were even trees on land on the earth, this system was in place in lobsters. It was in place in whatever the common creature was that diverged, forming crustaceans and men. That status recognition. You can treat lobsters with antidepressants, and lobsters will continue to fight even after they've just lost. That signal pathway is present in the human mind as well. So theoretical evolution, whatever, I get it. Back to that common origin, that structure is older than trees, right? And so you're not going to erase it. It's not a social construct. It's not the effect of culture that makes you smell whether someone is compatible with your genetics. This is older than you can imagine, right? That was the t-shirt study. Oh, let me tell you what that study was called before I move on here. Beauty is mostly in the eye of the beholder. Olfactory versus visual cues of attractiveness. It's not, but it takes a while to explain that. That's a long study. I'm not going to read all of it. This is interactions between observer and stimuli fertility status, endocrine and perceptual responses to intrasexual vocal fertility cues. Both men and women find female voices more attractive at higher fertility times in the menstrual cycle. Pretty neat. Suggesting the voice is a cue to fertility and or hormonal status. So, depending on how fertile you are, depending on where you are in your ovulatory cycle, there are changes in your voice. Every aspect of your being is affected by these chemicals. That's the point here. So even the rate at which your vocal cords vibrate when you're making sounds changes in response to how much estradiol is in your bloodstream. Preference for fertile females' voices provides males with an obvious reproduction advantage. However, the advantage for female listeners is less clear. One possibility is that the attention to the fertility status of potential rivals may enable women to enhance their own reproductive strategies through intrasexual competition. So I may need to be a little nicer today. I may even need to approach a man today. I might need to enhance my signs of reproductive fitness through makeup, through clothing, through behavior, etc. Maybe I wear perfume to mask that I'm not ovulating. If so, the response to having high fertility voices should include hormonal changes that promote competitive behavior. Furthermore, attention and response to such cues should vary as a function of the observer's own fertility, which influences her ability to compete for mates. Okay, so that directly relates to the lobster status orientation system that's in your mind. It would benefit a woman who is more sensitive to the signs of fertility in other women because she is able to adjust her own strategies in response to the status of the women around her. The same thing takes place for men. So maybe I'm not athletic enough to be able to compete in soccer, but I have a brilliant mind. So I can move out of the athleticism hierarchy into the intellectual prowess hierarchy, and perhaps I'll be more successful in the intellectual prowess hierarchy. Maybe maybe I am not as young as these girls, but perhaps I'm nicer to be around. Perhaps I can make myself appear more attractive than these other females. You get it, I'm sure. Furthermore, attention and response to such cues should vary as a function of the observer's own fertility, which influences her ability to compete for mates. The current study monitored variation in cortisol and testosterone levels in response to evaluating the attractiveness of voices of other women. Participants completed this task once during ovulation, then again during the luteal phase. The voice stimuli were recorded from naturally cycling women at both high and low fertility and from women using hormonal birth control. We found that listeners rated high fertility voices as more attractive compared to low fertility, with the effect being stronger when listeners were ovulating. Testosterone was elevated following voice ratings suggesting threat detection or the anticipation of competition, but no stress response was found. If I'm a woman, hearing the voice of a more attractive woman increases the level of testosterone my body is producing in response to a threat, right? This is a threat in the sexual marketplace. My body engages to make me more competitive, given that this woman has a higher status in the sexual marketplace. Pretty neat. Though fertility remains relatively concealed in humans as compared to other primate species. So the signs of ovulation, the signs of menstruation are more hidden in human females than they are in primates. Subtle physical changes that occur throughout the menstrual cycle may alter the perception of female attractiveness. Both men and women detect differences associated with fertility, such as heightened facial, vocal, and body odor attractiveness. All three of those components are going to vary based on where you are in your reproductive cycle. Preference for such cues provides an obvious advantage to men selecting mates of high productive capability. However, there are fewer supposed benefits for women to perceive changes in attractiveness as a factor of other women's fertility. It is possible that women may monitor the fertility of others to more effectively adjust their own mating strategies accordingly. Okay, all these other girls are wearing fucking giant t-shirts and Vans, and there are high quality, high status men hanging out or giving attention to these girls. I'm also going to wear a giant fucking t-shirt and Vans. Altering mating strategies in response to other females' hormonal profile requires physiological changes likely involving hormones. Indeed, women exhibit increased testosterone in response to the odors of high fertility women. So it's not just their voice, it's not just their appearance, it's not just their smell, it's everything. Everything about other women is causing physiological changes in you to make you more competitive with those women for resources, i.e., high status men, as well as increased sympathetic nervous system arousal to the voices of high fertility women. However, no work today has examined whether these responses vary as a function of the observer's menstrual cycle. It is possible that the motivation to respond to fertility cues in other women, as well as her hormonal response to those cues, differs based on fertility and subsequent desire to compete for a mate. Evidence supporting nubility and reproductive value as the key to human female physical attractiveness. This is Lassick and Gowland, Department of Anthropology at UC Santa Barbara. Selection should favor mating preferences that increase the chooser's reproductive success. Many previous studies have shown that the women men find most attractive in well-nourished populations have low body mass indices, that's a BMI, and small waist sizes combined with relatively large hips, resulting in low waist-hip ratios. Small waist, wide hips. The lower that ratio is, meaning the greater the difference is between the hips and the waist, the more attractive that person is going to be, that woman is going to be. A frequently proposed explanation for these preferences is that such women have enhanced health and fertility, but extensive evidence contradicts this health and fertility explanation. An alternative view is that men are attracted to signs of nubility and high reproductive value, i.e., by indicators of physical and sexual maturity in young women who have not been pregnant. So you might have massive hips, narrow waist, but that's not necessarily a sign of your reproductive fitness. That could be that you've already been pregnant and your hips have widened as a result of that. Your brain knows the difference. Using U.S. data from large national health surveys, we show that waist-hip ratio, waist-thigh ratio, waist stature ratio, and BMI are all lower in the age group 15 to 19, in which women reach physical and sexual maturity. Not mental maturity. Side note, women's brains are generally fully developed. You have a fully developed adult brain at about 22 years old. Men have a fully developed adult brain at about 25 years old. It's an evolutionary race to reach sexual maturity. Let's see. After which all of these anthropomorphic measures increase. We also show that a smaller waist in conjunction with relatively larger hips or thighs is strongly associated with nulligravidity. Null gravidity or gravita is pregnant. You've not been pregnant. With higher blood levels of docosahexaenoic acid, a fatty acid that is probably limiting for infant brain development. Thus, a woman with a small waist and relatively large hips that men find attractive is likely to be nubile and nulliparous, hasn't given birth, with maximal bodily stores of key reproductive resources. So, looking at a woman's hips and waist, your body, your brain, knows, probably before you've even recognized that you're looking at a woman, knows the reproductive fitness of that woman. Women being around each other a lot and syncing up, interesting, yeah. And not just that, but moving the signals for menstruation from the outside to the inside is a way of masking infertility, right? So if there's an external signal that you are menstruating, that indicates that you're infertile right now, and the attention of males is going to go elsewhere. If as an evolutionary advantage, the masking of that infertility gains you more access to higher status men more regularly, you do it. And so it's an advantage to bring that stuff internal. Oh, there's a limit on these live streams. I have 1 minute 53 seconds remaining. Let's see here. I'll tell you, do women's mate preferences, yada yada. I'll get to the title. The ovulatory shift hypothesis posits that women experience a relationship context-dependent cycle shift in their attraction to characteristics that reliably indicated genetic quality in ancestral males. What are those qualities? What are women looking for in men? Facial symmetry, face and body symmetry, and scents that are associated with face and body symmetry. What's up, Paul? Facial masculinity, angular features, broad jaw, things like that. Structural body masculinity. Vocal masculinity, or a lower vocal pitch, which again is going to be determined by hormones, and your receptiveness is going to be determined by hormones. Preference for behavioral dominance or felt superiority over men. So this is the alpha. Women can recognize alphas, and this is not dominance in the way that we think of it. It's not domineering, but dominance, referent power, things like that. Status cues. Facial cues of testosterone. Again, I mentioned it, jaw, angular features, and things like that. And so all of those things are going to be measures of partner quality. I got 24 seconds left. That was Do Women's Mate Preferences Change Across the Ovulatory Cycle? That's a meta-analytic review by Gildersleeve, Haselton, and Fales. I'll post screenshots of the abstracts for these studies. You guys have a good day. We'll see you.